Welcome to the Partnership Economy. This podcast explores the power of partnerships through candid conversations with industry leaders. Join our hosts, Dave Yovanno, CEO, and Todd Crawford, co-founder of Impact.com, as they unpack the future of partnerships as a lever for scale and an opportunity to put the consumer first.
Welcome back to the new season of the Partnership Economy. This is Todd Crawford, and I'm really excited to share the episode we have for you today. We've had so many insightful guests in season one, and we want to keep the momentum going by bringing more partnership experts into the conversation this season. Today's guest has been active in the partnership economy for nearly 15 years. Robert Glazer is the founder and board chair at Acceleration Partners, which is the largest independent affiliate and partnership marketing agency in the world. The company has received over 30 awards for its workplace culture. Robert hosts his own podcast called the Elevate Podcast and has over 200,000 subscribers to his newsletter called Friday Forward, present company included. We discuss some of the challenges of inflation, staffing shortages, and the remote working world we find ourselves in. And Robert shares why influencers and content marketers are outperforming paid search. Be sure to stick around to hear Robert's advice on how to become a great leader. This was a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Partnership Economy. I'm your host, Todd Crawford, and today I am joined by Bob Glazer, founder and chairman of the board at Acceleration Partners. Hey, Bob, how's it going?
Hey, Todd, good to see you. Beautiful office you have there.
Yeah, it's in the metaverse. I moved. This is the Partnership Economy podcast. I wanted to pick your brains today. But before, let's just kind of level set. Why don't you tell us who you are?
Well, I'm Bob Glazer. I was the founder and now board chair of Acceleration Partners, a company I started about 14 years ago. We're now the largest independent affiliate and partner marketing agency in the world. We focus on large scale, kind of global, complicated programs. And we've been doing that for a while. Yeah, no, I know you guys have had a lot of success. We've kind of worked side by side along this journey of partnership. So it's great to see you guys winning and growing and succeeding. And we would say for both of us, 5 years ago, if you wanted to run a global program, you probably had 5 agencies and 5 networks or platforms. Right now, you only need one agency and one platform if you pick the right one. So we continue to see that to be a strong value proposition as brands expand really quickly now around the world. I mean, the fastest growing part of our business is, hey, can you take what we're doing in one country into another country or into another product line or on that band?
Yeah, I think kind of like, looking at your services, and this has been a recurring theme in a lot of these podcasts, is this center of excellence. So some companies have that internally where they help multiple business units or multiple geos replicate and get data and make good decisions. Agencies are playing that role as well. And I think that's kind of what you just illustrated. Hey, we're doing this in one geo. We want to do it in other geos. How do we not screw it up and get the most traction?
Yeah. And some of the big misnomer is that these companies are global. They are international. Like the person in the UK, it's their budget, their team. Someone in the US, they do not want to be told what to do by the other region. But I think if you are someone that comes in with the experience and the support and the know-how, then there are opportunities there. But I've seen very few companies that operate fluidly, globally with a single sort of budget or stakeholder.
Yeah, I mean, we have our different geos, Europe, Asia Pacific. They have to have some autonomy and some connection, right? Some coordination, but it's definitely a struggle. Just the time zones alone make it challenging, right?
And look, if I was a vendor selling something to Impact, right, and it was a really cool thing that they were going to use, it's probably not bought globally, right? The US team decides they like it, and then the UK team decides they like it. And so, it is both a challenge and an opportunity. What we have seen, and I think you have seen is pretty consistently, and we get this message, is that if you really want a global program, you cannot run a program, out of country in most things. Like if you want to run a German program, you're going to need people on the ground in Germany. And I think people have tried to do that. I would say marketers are good at marketing, but this is one thing you really can't fake. Like you need to have a presence in these markets in order to really build programs in these markets.
Yeah, I think because of the relationship building and just the ability to talk to somebody is more important. Obviously, when you're buying media through Meta or Google, you don't need to talk to anybody. It's a coin-operated machine. You plug some euros into them and get a couple euros out. You're doing fine, and you can do that from the United States. But partnerships need more of that native language and also just that proximity to really maximize, I think, the results.
Yeah, absolutely.
I usually ask 3 or 4 questions in these podcasts. So I'm going to start with my typical first one. What's top of mind for you right now?
I mean, interesting, watching the unwinding of the pandemic trade so violently, over 2 years and 1 month. So I think, like everyone else, we're trying to understand, what this means for our business. Where are people rotating? Where's the demand going to be? We're seeing a lot of, demand shrink in some places, and then a lot of it increase. I think we're moving away from that stay at home, fix your house, buy a car, probably to travel, get out, have experiences. It just continues the seesaw of the last couple of years that whatever you were doing 6 months ago isn't even relevant to today. So, we're really trying to get our hands around that and understand, who's gonna come out on top as part of that secular shift.
Yeah, it seems like travel and entertainment are definitely coming back, but then you've got all this inflation and rising costs. Just getting on an airplane today is not as cheap as it was 2 years ago before the pandemic. So, it's interesting. There's pent-up demand, but then there's all this costs. I think we wish the pandemic were over, but, it just, it comes and goes. It goes away, it comes back.
I mean, Warren Buffett had one of my favorite quotes of all time, and I think we'll probably see this soon, but the cure for high prices is high prices, right? Eventually people start to make adjustments, they shrink back, they change the packaging. It does feel like, with some of the pullbacks, we were just talking like what's going on with crypto. I don't think people are going to feel as wealthy as they did maybe even 8 weeks ago. It's hard to believe that won't impact spending or consumer sentiment in some way.
Yeah, that's what the Fed's trying to do, right? It's increase the rates so that it's more expensive to leverage debt, and maybe that'll curb spending. But I think we're in for uncertain times for an uncertain time.
Amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else top of mind right now, or is that primarily it?
No, we're also, we're very focused on, moving towards this vision of a fully integrated partner marketing services firm. So, we completed an acquisition last week. We're continuing to look at a lot of opportunities and what are additional products and services that our clients will want around the world. So I'm spending a lot of time at that, looking at businesses, looking at things that be a fit, where we should build, where we should buy. We're very busy executing on our 3-year plan.
Yeah, I think that's key to getting where you want to go. Seems like a lot of people just kind of go business as usual, and somebody somewhere in a company has to be looking forward and moving the company in a direction where essentially you can grow. It's easy to stay where you are, and I have a lot of friends that have businesses, and those companies are relatively the same size year after year after year, which is comfortable, and they make good money. But I think to grow the industry, you need to grow your business, you need to grow the industry, and you need to have that vision beyond 6 months.
Yeah. Look, particularly in the digital marketing realm, you can't be doing what you were just by the nature of it. If you're doing what you were doing 5 years ago, you've already been passed. So I remember when we came into the industry, people really felt like they had been doing the same thing for a while and just hadn't had a lot of competition. And very quickly, I saw a lot of those players disappear. So, our job is to do what Netflix has done really well and figure out a way to obsolete yourself before, someone else does it to you.
All right. So what is keeping you up at night?
Look, this is always endemic in services. It's kind of, I always joke that, the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize in mathematics will be given out to the person who solves supply and demand in the service industry. Like, we're used to these sort of sine waves, but the last couple of years have just been supply shock, demand shock, supply shock, demand shock. So for myself and an organization that really likes to plan ahead and make good long-term decisions, it's been really, and then you throw COVID into that, it's been really hard to have to be so reactive and then execute on a long-term plan at the same time. So The best thing that could happen is the stock market goes up 1% next year, rather than the negative 30, positive 30, sort of whiplash. But I think that's really the biggest thing for me, is in terms of just really trying to balance, what are short-term realities? Because sometimes if you ignore the short term, it becomes a real problem, right? Like right now, you're a high-tech company losing money without a lot of money on your balance sheet. Like that wasn't a problem 9 months ago. That's a real problem, right now. So we're always trying to balance, looking forward and in the present. But it has just been a whipsaw like the last, couple of years. I think we're headed back now towards, more of a demand problem than a supply problem after not everyone talking about labor and supply in 6 months. I mean, we've seen the labor market cool down, definitely seen turnover, come down a lot. And we're seeing early signs that, who was driving that? A lot of those unprofitable tech companies, calling your people and our people and offering them, lots of money. That's shifted. So that's the challenge for every business right now, is kind of continuing to maintain this sort of wave while trying to execute on a long-term plan.
Yeah. I mean, those waves and ebbs and flows can become a real distraction, right? I mean,
yeah.
And like I said, I think most people day to day are focused on doing their job. It's maybe not even their role to worry about anything other than that. So it's the biggest challenges for the executives out there, the leadership trying to move the company forward. And that keeps me up at night as well. I think of like hiring. I mean, we're getting bigger and bigger, and we've got a lot of open job recs, and it just seems like there's no way you can fill all those jobs, no matter what, no matter how competitive you are or how exciting your company is or your culture. It's just a real challenge to find people and the right people, which is really always the challenge, but a lot of the right people is really hard.
And again, the pendulum swinging from a lot of company controlled, employee controlled, like it makes it complicated. Yeah, it's everyone wants to find great people. They want to get them aligned around a vision, and they want to get them focused on the long run. But it's harder to do that when you've got shutdowns and just constant. I can't think of a more difficult time to operate again than the last 3 years, and thinking about entire cycles and how they move. Everything's open and then there's a wave and then they're closed again. I mean, you just really need to have your pulse on the ground, and at the same time that you're trying to move yourself towards whatever that next frontier is.
Well, you guys have always had a remote workforce, which I think coming out of the pandemic or going through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic is really an advantage, because a lot of companies are very office centric, one location or multiple locations. I mean, we fell into that boat, I guess, or model. And it's kind of weird. Like I'm in the office today and there's less than 10 people here in this office that can support over 100. And it's just people don't want to go back to work. And I know there's people within 5 miles of this office that are just working from home. They feel comfortable there now. They're like reacclimated away from this office environment. It's kind of weird. Like I see Apple's struggling, right? Like they're mandating 2 or 3 days a week.
Doesn't seem to have worked that well to tell people to come back into the office, or that they have to, right?
I think it's early still, because, they get these waves of these variants and they're more contagious, but maybe not as high a hospitalization rate. And some people still don't want to be vaccinated, maybe. So, getting people into an office is still a little bit of risk, it feels like, right?
Yeah. And the question is, there's definitely stuff that's better in person. For example, offsites, like team offsites and strategy sessions. And, you can even imagine there's certain days when I need to sit down and work on a document for 6 hours. And there's other time where we need to go through a new product strategy that really we could benefit from sitting in a room for an hour. So I think trying to be really thoughtful about not being dogmatic around a specific policy or other. Again, we're in office or we're blowing up the office, but like, what are the activities where in-person collaboration makes sense, and what are the ones where they don't? Again, for me to travel into an office, let's say it's the day before a board meeting, and for me to travel into an office and put my heads down and not talk to anyone and work on a deck for 8 hours, like it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. To lead a new hire onboarding training, maybe a lot of sense. To do an offsite. So I think there's a lot of people trying to rather than focusing on what actually makes sense. And a lot of employees who've said, look, their company had record earnings and did great. And while they were working from home and they frankly had flexibility, but not a lot of places to use it. I said, anyone who liked working from home during the pandemic, you don't even really understand half the value of the flexibility of remote. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere. Your kids were in school in the other room. You couldn't go meet your friend at the gym for lunch. So yeah, I think it's smart to think about what actually makes sense for each business. And I think it is different for each business, right? Obviously, you got some businesses where you're making something, you're manufacturing something, and other ones where there are certain points of collaboration where it's going to make sense to get together. And then there's other times where everyone's crunching on something and it might not need to be in the office together for that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, when I guess all this dust finally settles, what a work environment really will be. I mean, I'm pro hybrid or remote more now than before, but I still enjoy being in an office. I really do. I enjoy interacting with
I like people. Again, yesterday I was marking up a book draft for 6 hours. I needed quiet on that, but there are other days when I really enjoy it. So I don't think it's going to be one or the other. I think the thing that's going to stay is flexibility. I don't think there's going to be a lot of demand for jobs with rigidity. Look, it's going to be interesting for some of the companies. If you're a 24-year-old or you're going to school and you could do something a job that's going to offers you, you pick one thing where it offers you flexibility and the other requires being in person by the nature of what that role is. Supply and demand are pretty powerful forces. As Mark Cuban said, he was talking about this in terms of cryptocurrency. He said supply and demand are undefeated, right? And so I think if you have much more of a workforce looking for flexibility, companies that are offering rigidity are going to find that that's not really super valued in the marketplace.
The transition from in-office to remote work or hybrid work is going to be different from company to company and maybe even from employee to employee as things evolve post-pandemic. Finding what works for your staff is going to take some experimentation. And as I said, I still like coming into the office for some of that in-person face time. Next, we'll hear why Bob believes partnerships and influencers will continue to grow and outpace some of the other digital marketing channels. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about industry dynamics. What's going on in this partnership economy that's got your attention? That's what kind of industry dynamics?
To me, it's just the convergence of seeing the growth in influencer and people interested in doing more stuff on a hybrid or performance basis, on B2B, on channel partnerships, on all the different types of things that fell outside of, I think, the traditional affiliate marketing umbrella. I think that continues to be a trend. I mean, the main, and then what's driving it is, and you alluded to this earlier, I don't get off of a call any day. I mean, I heard it twice this morning where someone was talking to our clients and they're just not making money anymore in sort of paid search, paid social, the stuff that's formed the basis of their marketing portfolio. It's just not working anymore. We talk about inflation in the economy. I mean, inflation in digital marketing, there's been a lot of liquidity in that market. So that's a real big fundamental shift. The amount of CEOs have told me that the way they built their business and the channel they used in the last 5 years would not work today. And so I think that's pushing people towards new and different solutions.
Yeah, I've been really excited about how partnerships have expanded, and it's different for different brands, but in general, just kind of leaning in now because Google and Meta, I mean, both of them year over year increased around 70%. And that's not to talk about the increases the year before that. And it's a coin operated machine and you've got all your eggs in two baskets. And I think once they see how partnerships work and the value they provide, and you don't have to sit there and constantly plug those machines, with money or it goes away. I think, to me, that's what's really been exciting is seeing the results. And even 5-10 years ago, where suddenly partnerships are outperforming. And that to me is when you realize it's really something material that companies need to get a handle on. Like, what does it mean for them and how much are they willing to invest? Because the other side of this is just there's more investment up front before it pays off, right? Like, I can't come to you as a partner and hand you a bag of money and you hand me back 2 bags of money tomorrow.
More like organic search was, which I think always outperformed paid search if you were willing to be patient and do the work and invest and, plant and harvest. I don't know. There's something philosophical around that, is that the things that are easiest to do usually have the least competitive advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if you sell e-bikes, you could create all kinds of great content, how-to things you didn't know about e-bikes, how to fix them, how to service them, what kind you should get, all that content that customers find valuable. And today, Google's not going to rank you as an advertiser. You're not getting that ranking still organically. They want you to pay. Instead, they're ranking all of these content commerce publishers that are actually writing these reviews and recommendations and how-to guides. So, it's interesting because before, brands could rely on their own content marketing to get them good organic ranking. And I'm seeing it go away. I mean, I always use on all these podcasts, top 5 chef knives. If you type that in, the only brands you see on the first page are the paid search. Everything else is content commerce publishers.
Yeah,
all organic.
Look, the ethos of Web3 is more control from the creators, decentralization. When you see something like Instagram come out with the influencer platform and say, "Oh, well, build it on our platform and do it with us," I think there's a lot of hesitancy around that. People are like, "Look, we've seen this before, so then it works for us, and then you double the price, and we've done everything on your platform, and then where does that leave us?" So I think this ethos of one of the things of Web3, more direct control, more owning your own ecosystem, owning your own partnerships, not building your. I mean, a lot of the folks who've built their brand from a creator standpoint on these platforms realize it's not portable from there. So I think that those are a lot of the changes that we're going to see, and I think people are going to want a little more control.
Well, I think the other side of the coin there is that consumers are more in control too, right? They're the ones, they're listening to influencers, friends, families for recommendations. They're also doing their own research now, and that content is invaluable. No one's clicking on an ad because they typed in best e-bike and they're going to click on the top paid search ad and go buy an e-bike. It's too big of a considered purchase. There's a lot of information they need to get, and an ad is not going to convince someone to buy.
Yeah. I mean, It's interesting times. Like, people value more what someone else says about the brand than trusting the brand, talking about the brand. In some cases, that may not be right, or the person may be, a little too, closely tied, but it is very different time, where it used to be you talked about yourself and you told everyone about yourself. And now it's, you let the community talk about you and you let them see the product, and, there's more authenticity in that. So I think how people buy is changing, where they're buying is changing. And, again, I think that's going to be a big change to marketing in terms of how you then get in front of that customer or potential customer, where they are. In some ways, it's almost going back to 15 years ago, where you take context and you put advertising against it, right? So, Todd, you're looking for a car, and you're looking for a high-end SUV. And so BMW serves you an ad, rather than Todd's on a sports diet. And because I know Todd is a, handsome, whatever 40-year-old guy, and I have his whole profile here, that I'm serving him an ad for the auto, even though he's not doing anything related to it. And I don't think people realize that that's been what's been going on the last couple of years, is their ads have nothing to do with where they are. It's just sort of owning their profile and then going and finding the cheapest place where they can kind of put up a sign in front of it, rather than you're on a sneaker blog review site talking about the coolest sneakers that come out this year. And then after they say that the Nike whatever sneaker is great, they offer you a link to buy it from a shoe store. Like, just that's a very logical, non-invasive advertisement.
Right. Well, the way I look at it is, most people don't trust ads, but they trust these content sites where they've written a review and a recommendation. And so, because as a consumer, I trust that publisher, and now they are linking to that advertiser, it kind of transfers that trust to that advertiser that way, as opposed to, now I'm just seeing in my feed this brand that also wants me to buy from them, even after I've already bought, which really just, is almost like the nail in the coffin on this whole advertising problem. It's
the retargeting, the retargeting stuff, and the amount of times I've said something to my wife at a table and talked about it, or she did it on her phone and our phones are near each other. And then, I'm seeing the ad the day later, it's just a little creepy.
I know. I hear you.
People are out there looking for stuff. They're interested in stuff. They're telling you their intent. So why not match up, the intent with things that are relevant for them? And look, this is what's been interesting to publishers too, right? Years ago, we'd go to publishers, you and I had talked to them, do stuff on a performance. No, we're getting these CPMs, for running these ads. Well, that just absolutely collapsed. But what was interesting was some publishers realized we can make more money rather than just running the machine that targets people with irrelevant ads and getting a cut of that. What if we actually merchandise stuff or thought about what we were showing people and got paid a higher premium on that? And the folks who jumped in early to that found that they could even make more money being a merchandiser and, thinking about what actually made sense to put in front of customers.
Yeah, helping customers make decisions, informing them, entertaining them. That's what these sites do best. And now they've got a whole bunch of content that not only does that, but lists that ranks so well organically. I mean, that's free traffic. It's free traffic for the brand, it's free traffic for the publisher. So that's where you get away from this coin-operated machinery and you start having this kind of sustainable presence is kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, one of our favorite quotes from the book that we wrote, Moving to Outcomes, was there was an economist who did a study of you talking about the auction effect and how people get pulled into the auction effect and just overbid, right? It's one thing to overbid, it's one thing if it's amorphous value, right? And it just a sports team, there's not a clean market for that. You want it for $4 billion and you have $4 billion, then you buy it. It's more like art. But, there's other things that have much more specific commodity value. So they looked at eBay, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago. eBay's got an auction side of their site and they got a fixed price side of their site. And they looked at a whole bunch of products and they were selling for average of, I think, 70% more on the auction site than on the fixed price site, which makes no sense. But that's what happens when you get caught up in auction pricing.
Yeah, and you're right. That's what's happening with the way you buy media today, right? It's
my competitors at $1 or something. I'm just $1.05, and then they go to $1.06, and then I'm not going to lose. I'll go to $1.07, and the only problem is this: my profit. I determined that my profit to stop making money after 70 cents, right?
Yeah, I think there's this whole. It's almost like the fear of missing out when you're advertising. If you're not in the results or not being shown, you feel like you're missing something, and so then you're like, I'll pay more. Same with an auction. I want that so bad that I'll overpay for it.
I can't tell you the number of times over the past few years where someone said to me, well, we need to do that because so-and-so is doing that, or they're there, or they're on that site. And it's like, do you know that they're not losing money? Wouldn't that be a good thing? I remember years ago in commission, our commissioner, our competitors are all paying commissions of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, that seems really high. And then, 6 months later, we were asked to audit that program and it's like a disaster of fraud and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, again, be careful what you're emulating.
Yeah, I hear you. Like I said, I feel really good about where partnerships are going and the value they're bringing to everyone, right? Consumers, publishers, brands. Nobody's losing here. It's great content. It's great awareness.
It's not snake oil. It's not the new hottest thing. Someone was saying it's a very equivalent to email and CRM. It seems like this email and CRM have worked for 20 years. As things get hot, everyone forgets about it. They move on. But I've even looked at these businesses that make great amount of money and still sending, using email as acquisition and retention. And it's worked for a really long time. It's just not super sexy. And it's never, had a total boom and a total bust. So it's interesting how people get distracted by the new and shiny thing. And then they tend to go back to things that just work and are tried and true. And, as we all saw, during the initial outbreak of the pandemic and a lot of the shifts, I think more CEOs and exec teams actually started understanding the value of the channel. And it was the last budget to get cut because, I mean, no matter how much you're cutting your budget, you'll still pay 10 cents for a dollar and pay that after the fact if it's worth it for you.
Yeah, I think that fixed return on ad spend is comforting. And, when you're just plugging a slot machine, pulling that arm, right? You're hoping it pays off. You're hoping it pays off. And one day it is, and the next day it isn't. And you got to increase, you got to put more money in, right? And that's where I think partnerships have had that kind of steady, there's that upfront investment, which I think a lot of companies underinvest in because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know they're going to get what they're going to get. And once they get it, it sustains. Well, hey, this has been a great conversation. I'd like to wrap this up with kind of asking you over your career and things that you've accomplished, who has really been a mentor or influential in your success?
I've had a lot of great mentors. I think one of the more recent ones, and still someone who coaches me on a regular basis, is a gentleman named Warren Rustand, who's been CEO, leader, board member, 50 companies, and has just really invested, the latter part of his career in helping build better leaders. Someone who really sort of espouses the point of values-based leadership and understanding who you are and what you want, and sort of making that the foundation of authentic leadership. And he's just been a great advisor, mentor, sounding board to me for 6 or 7 years now. It was actually a 5-day leadership program with him almost 9 years ago. That was just a huge inflection point for me in my career.
I think people, they always aspire to be better leaders, and you can always read a book or something, but having someone that can kind of steadily guide you, because it's not as easy as one presentation or one seminar or one book to really make it work across an organization.
It's either a vicious or vicarious, cycle in terms of, I think, bad leaders spawning bad leader. I've seen the damage, the personal damage that people who've worked under really poor, leadership for years and stuff cost. And so I just think there's a huge opportunity in businesses for us to, build better leaders and create more positive experiences. And, businesses governments aren't getting anything done these days. I think businesses are going to be a lot of the force for change. And I think, the better leaders we have in those businesses, the better outcome for all those employees too.
Yeah. And I think, most people don't quit a company, they quit their manager, right? It's their manager 100%. That's not helping them or supporting them. Well, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. It's always good to catch up with you. And hopefully we'll have you on again as time goes on here. But continued success to you and Acceleration Partners. And
thanks, Doc. We'll see you soon. See you at IPX.
Having worked closely with Bob and Acceleration Partners for many years, it was great to have him on the show and learn what he's currently focused on. The glory days of paid ads and retargeting might be vanishing farther and farther into the rearview mirror. It's not that they are going away, but there are better channels out there for your marketing spend with a higher ROI. Bob also brought up a good point that brands need to let go of the reins a bit and let the community talk about your brand and product. If potential customers are getting a recommendation from someone they trust, they become more confident in their buying decision. It really comes down to authenticity. The right partners and influencers can bring your brand to their audience in a trusted way, something that advertisements are finding it harder and harder to do. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to next time.
Thanks for listening to The Partnership Economy, brought to you by Impact.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the show and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts.